If you'd like to learn how to use loops inside loops in Roblox Studio to make all of the animations inside your Roblox character play one after the other, keep watching and I'll show you exactly how to do it. Welcome to Roblox Snippets. Today we're going to learn about loops inside of loops, and as the example we're going to play through all of the animations that are inside of our character. Now you may have noticed in the example at the beginning that I had this GUI here, and it looks like this. That's going to list the name of the animation and then which animation is running underneath it. So there are multiples, which we'll have a look at quickly now. You can play along if you like. Now this GUI in here, you can download that from my website, from the link in the description below the video. Go to the resources section and download the resource and unzip it. There's instructions on the website how to do that and add it into Studio if you have never done that before. And it just saves us a bit of time rather than making a GUI in this video here. Alright, so if we come up and play, right, with the project running, if I expand the workspace and then I find my character and expand my character, we'll find the animations. So under the character you will find an animate script here, alright, and you'll notice that it is a local script that is a default part of your character. If you then expand that script, you'll notice it has these values underneath it. And if you click on one with the hashtag, you'll see the class name is a string value. Alright, so this is the name which we're going to display up here. And if I then expand this, you'll see it has an animation object underneath. So its class name is animation. Now some of these, for example dance 3 has 3 different animations under the one name. So we're going to use loops within loops that will enable us to put the name, the value up here up the top, and then have this run through underneath before moving on to the next name. This is a very useful concept in programming, very powerful, and can be used in many different ways. So the aim is to show you how to make use of it, and you can apply it to your own projects. So I'll go ahead and stop that there now, and we'll also hide our GUI. Right, we'll make a start on writing the code, and we're going to do this in our starter character. So down the bottom, starter player, expand that, and then click on starter character and add a local script. Now as we're working with animations, those happen on the client, and that's what our local scripts are for. So we'll change the name of this to animate character for now, just so we know it's sort of what its purpose is. And we'll create a number of variables here for us to work with once we create our loops below. So the first one is players, so we can get a hold of our player service. So capital P equals game and get service, and we are getting the players service. Alright, now right below this we'll get our player that we're going to use. So local player, and we'll just use an abbreviated version there, equals, and we'll look inside of all the players in the game and get the local player. So that is your character on your client machine. Now we'll create a couple of variables to get a hold of this anims GUI that I've created. The first thing we need, however, is to get access to the starter GUI. Now this actually becomes or gets called player GUI when the game runs. So we create a variable here. So player GUI will be player and then wait for child and player GUI. And this is a good example of why we use wait for child sometimes, because this player GUI doesn't exist until the game runs and starter player gets changed, starter GUI gets changed into player GUI. So we wait here and it prevents errors. Once we have the player GUI, we can look inside it to get the anims GUI. So local player anims GUI equal player GUI colon wait for child anims in inverted commas and type exactly the name as it is. And if we look inside here, there's a frame, so we'll wait for the frame as well. So we just add a dot to the end here and then type the name anims frame. Anims frame. Right. Now that we have our frame, there's these two items that we want to access a bit later to update our information. So we'll create a variable for each of those. So local player value label will be player anims GUI dot value label, and local player anim. So what do we call over here? Sorry, anim label. Only we'll do it with a capital. Equals player anims GUI dot anim label. Alright, so that's our GUI looked after in terms of variables. Now we'll actually get our character. So that's fairly simple. We say local character equals script.parent. Remember that we are inside of the starter character folder, so the character will be the parent of this script. Then we'll get the character's humanoid, so human character, and wait for child humanoid. Once we have the humanoid, we'll be using this later. However, the character is the one that we're going to look in to get the animate folder. If you remember, it's directly underneath the character. So we'll create a variable here for animate to get that script, which will be equal to character and then wait for child and animate. So make sure it's a capital A here. And that will be all of the variables. There's one or two others that we will create as we move down, but they're the main ones that we'll use in this script. Alright, so before we move on, so we've got a point of reference. What I'm going to do is just play the game, and you can do this too if you wish. While the game is playing, come into your character again and find your animate script here. So this one here. Not the one we just created, but the actual animate. Right click on that and copy this. Then stop the game. And I want you to scroll down to your starter character and we'll right click and paste into. And now while we're working, we can have a look at these so that I can talk to you without having to run the game all the time. And this is also a very good way if you change your animation IDs to update directly the character by this will overwrite the default. Alright. However, come back to our script once we have this to look at, and I'll explain what we'll do next. So we're going to firstly create a table, and it's going to grab all of these values in here that we want to look at. Now all of them, alright, are the same, only you'll see there's a couple of other things in here that we don't want. So all of these are all string values. Okay. They're the ones that we want. But down here we have an item such as this called a bindable function, and up the top we've got this scale dampening percentage, which is actually a value, but it's a number value. So initially we want to get just everything that is a string value under animate. So what we'll do is we'll create a table here called all names, and we'll just set it to an empty table with a set of squiggly brackets like this. Now we're going to populate this table, or add all of these items in here just using a single loop. So below this we'll say for underscore, which means as many items as there are inside of the table we're looking at, a comma, and then each value. So this is a name that you can write. I could have just wrote V here if I liked, but each value, because that's what we're talking about, in, and we're going to look in animate. Alright, and we're going to get all the children inside of here and then do. So this is effectively creating a table here without assigning it to a variable, but it's getting everything in here, including the things we don't want. Alright, there's two items. So we need to now use a conditional statement to filter out these and just get these. Right, and we do that inside here by writing if each value dot class name. Right, remember that I said down here class name, and it tells you what it is. So if each value dot class name equals a string value, which is the thing we're looking for, then we can add this to our table, right? And we'll do that by saying table dot insert, and all names is the table that we want to insert it into, and then we type the value, which is each value. And that will create this table here with just the names and all of the animations inside of it. All right? So if you wanted to see what this looked like, you can come down here and you can simply put in print and put all names, and let's have a look at what that looks like. Down the bottom in the output window, you'll see this drop down. So if we click on this, I'll just slide this up here, you'll see that we've got all of the names in here. Now it hasn't added the animations in as well, just the names. All right, so that's what we're using for the top part of our GUI. So we'll stop that there and come back to our script, and you can I'll leave that in there for now, but I'll just comment it out so it doesn't print again. And now we're going to move down and we're going to look at doing the animations, or getting those and getting them to play. So this is where we're going to create our loops inside of loops. So the first loop that we'll create will be for I equals 1, and then comma, hashtag all names do. Now hashtag, what it's doing is it will count the number of items that we just put into it here, and it will loop through all of these. It'll count how many's there, so it'll go from I up to however many there are in here to ensure that it does all of them. So we're looping through all of the names. Now remember that over here, that's this part here. So this is what this value is, these names. And if we open it up, each one will have one, or down here, more items underneath. So this loop is effectively taking care of this outside group here, and the loop that we'll write now inside will look at each of these items inside of each of the names. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. But we need to get a hold of these as we're looping. So what we'll do is we'll create a variable here called all anims, and it will be equal to all names, I, and get children. So each time this runs and we get to say cheer, this all anims will be creating a table of whatever is inside of the here. So sometimes it'll just be one item. So I1 in here will be this. But when we get down to dance, for example, this will become 3 items. All right? So, and this changes each time this outer loop runs through, creates a different table for us to loop through with this variable. All right, now I know this can get confusing, so I'm trying to go quite slow, but hopefully that makes sense to you. Once we have a table here with either one or more items, we're going to now loop through whatever these are in here. So just below here, we'll create another for loop, and this time we'll use J, so a different letter, equals 1, and then comma, hashtag all anims, and do. So remember, it's going to count how many animations are inside this table. So it might be 1, or it might be 3, or however many there are. And at this stage, we've got enough now for us to look at actually loading and playing the animations. So we'll write that code now, which will be local track, so our animation track will equal our humanoid, and we're going to load animation And what we want to load is each of the animations that we're creating in here. Only we're going to load the first one, so J, which will be 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it might be. So we type that as all animations, and then a set of square brackets, and we put in here J. Now what happens with two loops when you run them is the outside loop will be 1 when you first run. Alright, so that makes sense. And it'll run through until it gets to here. Now let's say we're on dance and it has 3 items in here. The inside loop will run from here to here, and that'll be 1, and then it'll go 2, and then it'll go 3, and when it's finished this for loop, it'll move down to here, and then I up here will become 2. So it will move down. Alright, so that's how that works. The inside loop will always complete first before increasing the outside loop. Alright, now once we've done that, we can simply say track and we will play. Now we're going to update our GUI that we created to show what is going on with what's playing, so what the name or the value is, and we'll do that just below here by saying p value label dot text will equal, and we'll put a 7 inverted commas animation value, right, and then a colon, and I just use 2 dashes like an arrow. You can just use equals if you like, or nothing like this. And outside of this, we're going to put 2 dots because we're going to join another string, and we'll put a hashtag to show that it's a value, and then dot dot all names, and I'll just get rid of this window so you can see all names square brackets with I, because remember we're looking at names, so we want the outside loop, not J, so I, and we want the name. So this will effectively give us, if I bring up this window again, this name here, so it'll be cheer, so hashtag cheer dance, etc. Alright, then below that we'll say anim label dot text will equal, and we'll just put a space in there, animation playing, and we'll put a colon, and so dot dot all anims J this time dot name. So in this case what it's doing is it's grabbing this animation object, but it's just putting its name, so animation 1, 2, etc., and that's what's going to be put into here. Okay. Now if you want to know how many animations are there, just out of interest, you could come up the top here and we can add another variable called count, which is we can set to 0, and then down here each time an animation plays we'll say count plus equals 1, so it will increase, and we'll let the animation play, and we'll insert a task.wait here of say 2 seconds, which should let all of the animations play completely before we stop them. So once an animation is playing, before we load and play the next one, we want to stop any animations on the character that are playing, and before we load the next one. So we'll do that by saying local all tracks will equal humanoid get playing animation tracks. Alright, so this is a built-in method that will gather up any tracks that are playing on the humanoid at the time and return it to us as a table, and then we can loop through this, so for I, comma V, just as a variable to say go through each one, in pairs, all tracks, do, and we're just going to say V colon stop, and that will stop any animations. And then lastly, we'll return the player back to their idle state before we load a new animation. So it'll be humanoid, load animation, and we'll load in the animate, which is the folder inside the humanoid, .idle, .animation1, or you could change it to whatever you like, and then a colon play at the end. And then finally, right at the very end, we'll add a task.wait of, say, half a second before we loop again and play the next animation. All right, and that completes our loop within loops. Now, there's a couple of other things we just need to wrap up before we test this. So if you come up to just above where our first loop is here, when we run the game, it's going to immediately start running these. So we want to pause briefly before we do that. So we'll say task.wait of, say, 5 seconds. That will let the game load so that we can be watching when the code runs. And when that happens, because the GUI is currently not enabled, we will enable the GUI here. So we'll say player anims GUI dot parent, right, dot enabled equals true. Because where this script is, remember it's, or where the anim is, sorry, is inside a frame. So we have to go up to the frame and then up to the GUI. So that's why the parent is in here. And then once we've run this, come right down the end after the last end here, and we will, well, you can actually take a copy of this if you like. So copy this, Command or Control C, and then down the bottom, Command or Control V to paste, or you can right click and copy and paste that way if you like. And we'll change this to false to hide the GUI again. And since we counted the number of animations, we can put in simply a print statement in here to say finished playing, and a space, and then toString count. So that's the number that we want to put in there as a string, another couple of inverted commas, a space, animations. And this will be the last thing that plays after all the animations have finished playing. Alright, so come up to the top and click on File and Save, and let's play. Alright, I'm loading in, and as you can see, nothing's happening just yet, and there we go. After 5 seconds, you'll notice that this is coming up. Now, if I bring up this screen over here, and we look in our starter character, our animate, you'll see we're up to dance 2, animation 3, and then we've gone to dance 3, animation 1, 2, it's playing 3, and then it should move to fall, there we go. So as you can see, it's presenting itself correctly up the top, and it's also playing through all of your animations down the bottom. And that is very, very useful thing to implement into your own games, not just for playing animations, but for many other things if you put your mind to it. If you found this video useful, subscribe now. For more information about my online courses, go to mrbrendanross.com.